Hello, welcome to An Old Man Running. A good friend of mine, Steve, ran the Boston Marathon this year. He's the same age as me at 61 and he finished it in an excellent 3:38 time. So I took the opportunity to interview him about his experience before and during the race. And we talked also about his training for the race and how he overcame a couple of injuries to make it to the start line. As someone who's considering running Boston next year, it was an extremely useful conversation for me and gave me a ton of insight into what it's like both to prepare and take part in the race. If that's something you're considering for next year, I think this is a very useful conversation. After we talked about the race, we also discussed Steve's future plans, and that took us into a general conversation about trail running, ultra running, about whether a half marathon is maybe a better distance for older runners like ourselves, and whether to really be successful, if you want to win your age group category, you should be focusing on one particular race, or whether it's possible to maybe combine a bunch of different distances and types of running. And then we concluded our conversation with a bit of discussion about marathon nutrition, that what you consume building up to and during the race can be every bit as important as the training you've been doing in the weeks leading up to it. So I hope this is an interesting and useful conversation for you. If it is, please consider giving me a like and subscribing to An Old Man Running. The interview will also be part of the Old Man Running podcast, which is launching soon, but we're going to make a point of including all the podcast episodes on YouTube so that you can get them in either channel. So without any further preamble, here's Steve talking about his Boston Marathon 2023 experience. Hello, Steve.
Morning, David. How are you?
I'm good. I see you've got is it a long sleeve or a short sleeve?
Yeah, long sleeve, with the Adidas 3 stripes on the shoulders. Really nice technical, long sleeve, lightweight t-shirt. I was pretty impressed, and in running in Pittsburgh and Minnesota, it will come into play. Adidas really owned Boston. There was actually some pretty heavy blowback about it in a couple areas. One, the jacket was very polarizing this year.
Yeah.
They made it out of recycled plastic bottles, and it was a weird sort of gray color, and you either hated it or you loved it. And then Adidas controlled the whole expo, so it wasn't really. Yeah, and that bummed a lot of people out because they hoped to get in there and just see the full spectrum of vendors.
Yeah.
But there were no other shoe vendors in there.
Wow.
It was all Adidas. Yeah, which is kind of a bummer. That should be an open, democratic system.
Going back to your amazing success there, you were 3:38 and change, and Sadie was 3:22 and change, I think, and fantastic result under any circumstances. But I mean, it wasn't ideal weather either, was it?
No, it wasn't. We feel pretty good about it. You always think and know you can go faster, and I had grander ambitions in mind for myself. But at the end of the day, cross that line and you realize you finished at our age, which is an accomplishment in its own right. And we finished under 4 hours, which is a pretty good line too. And, Sadie waited for me in the finisher area. And so that was just an emotional moment to come across and see her. And we got a great marathon photo. Was there taking pictures. We got a great photo of the two of us together with our medals on. So that was super fun. Yeah, so overall, just an incredible experience. Boston's amazing. It lives up to all its reputation, both good and bad. It's good because it's so well run. It's a well-oiled machine, really iconic. You go through all these famous towns and take a moment to kind of appreciate Wellesley and the Newton Hills and that kind of thing. Bad because it's a hard course. It's you start out on a downhill and start out with huge crowds. It actually took us about 4 miles. Sadie had come back to my corral. If you want to run with another runner, the faster runner has to move back to the slower runner. The slower runner can't move up. Boston's very controlling, and so she moved back to my corral, and that hurt us a little bit because it took about 4 miles before we could really get into our pace and stride, just because it was so crowded and so hard to pass people. So I'm not sure that the solution to that. I was running in my corral, which should, in theory, be people who want to run the pace we wanted to run. But it's exciting and challenging. And the weather was pretty good temperature-wise, low 50s. But it was just like a moist, 100% humidity. There was a cloud over the area, and always a light mist at least. And then at about 17, we got hit with a big downpour. Right when you're in the Newton Hills, pretty disheartening as it is. But I don't know. It didn't kill me at least. And it stopped, and then you sort of start to dry off, and it wasn't terrible. So there was a little bit of a headwind the whole way. All in all, a tremendous experience. The city is amazing. Plan to spend, we got there Friday, so we were there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Careful not to walk around too much and kill our legs. We took the T and Ubers and whatnot, and Sadie had lined up some good restaurants. The family, Teresa and Brent, came to support us, so we had the whole family there, and it was super fun.
The race itself, in terms of how you'd planned it out, did it go pretty much as you'd planned it out?
Yeah, no, I mean, yes and no. For a little while it did. I was hoping to run with Sadie the whole way, and I felt like I trained to achieve that. But at about 8 miles, 8.25, I had to pee basically. And our agreement has long been, Sadie and I, if someone has to stop, the other person goes on. Don't compromise your race. And so I said, just stay to the right. I'll try to catch you. So it took me about a minute to go to the bathroom, and then I was pounding. We knew that Brent and Teresa were going to be at 14.5. And so I really wanted to catch up with her by then. So I pounded out those miles, but she was pounding out the miles too. So I wasn't gaining on her during that time. They're all sort of sub 7:30s and 7:30 to 7:40 range, and but she was doing the same thing. So I didn't pick up any distance, and after 8 I was on my own, as was she. But anyway, that's the marathon. I think it's tremendously difficult to run with someone else unless you're gonna go slow and really enjoy it. If you're going to try to run competitively, you'd have to really find a training partner that you're compatible with.
You've always used the 10-10-10 rule, where the last 10K you're really having to run with your heart. Was that the case in this one?
We agreed to modify the strategy a little bit for Boston. Right. Yeah, so we went with the idea was to go just 13-13. It's based on our grandma's experience. 10-10-10 sounds nice, but that last 10K isn't realistic. That's when everything's going wrong in your body. And to think that you can find another gear at that point we thought was unrealistic. We thought it would be easier to just run the first 13 relaxed, and basically do a 13-mile warm up for a half marathon. Run the first 13 relaxed, and then step on the gas for the next 13. Try to sustain it as long as you can. So kind of simplify that strategy. Yeah. And it worked like a dream for Sadie. If you look at her splits on Strava, she achieved. It didn't work so much for me. First 13 was good, and then I got a few more good miles in, but I started getting tight in the legs in the mid-teens, and then you have the Newton Hills and the rain, and at that point it was just a battle to finish and convince my legs to do what I wanted them to do. It was super funny and sort of reassuring when Kipchoge, he had a tough race for him at least. And he said something really funny, that as he was going through the Newton Hills, or when he got to Heartbreak Hill, his left leg just wouldn't come up anymore. And I just had to laugh and say, yeah, like neither one of my legs were coming up anymore, Like it happens to the best of us, Elliot. And so I had to had a good laugh at that. You pump your arms in hopes that your legs will follow, and they, you're sending the message down there, but they're just not there to get it done. But anyway, it's interesting. As you know, I focused on like resilience, cadence, and flexibility for this marathon. And cadence was very successful. I've increased my cadence just in general. I had a typical pretty slow cadence, and Sadie learned in college athletics that cadence is the secret to running fast. And so I worked hard on that. Resilience, the idea was to do more time on feet runs, more longer runs, 3-hour type runs. And I did them all at sort of aerobic threshold, sort of 130s. In one way that worked. I didn't get any kind of blowouts. Nothing sort of broke during the race. Yeah. But in another regard, I don't think it worked, because I think you've got to get out there a couple times running 20 miles at sort of 95% race pace, or even race pace. Get your body accustomed to that. You need to be accustomed to distance, but you need to be accustomed to distance at speed. And that's I think one of the areas that I was lacking.
What about, just before I come back to that, your cadence, what were you hitting as an average cadence then?
I have kind of a a long loping stride. So it was a matter of tightening up the stride length. And I've got at Grandma's, my average cadence was 164, and at Boston, it was 170. I'm not sure I'll ever be at Kipchoge's 180, but I'm working on it. Even on relaxed runs, I'm working on keeping that cadence up. Because when you're a loper, that just gets worse as you get tired, and you try to make up lost time with longer distance, and the longer you're reaching that stride out, the more pounding and damage you're doing. So I think important for older runners to really get that cadence up, and more of a quick stride than a long loping.
No, I agree with that. In fact, it's the one thing I've got right with all of my running.
You have an amazing cadence.
I'm bang on 180 all the time now. And in fact, I had to get it down from, like, when I was racing, it was well into 190. So I was like the old, like you see the older Japanese runners like that. So that's one good thing for me. But I mean, there's so many other things I need to fix. At least I've got one going.
It's funny you mentioned the Japanese runners. There was a guy in Boston who ran in those sort of old traditional Japanese wooden clogs. They're like a sandal with a wooden piece that sticks straight down 4 inches high, like a click-clocking kind of clog or some kind. Anyways, his time was better than mine, so it was very, very humbling. Maybe that's the next shoe revolution.
Yeah, maybe. I think your time in Boston was it slightly faster than you ran Grandma's in?
It was almost exactly a minute slower than Grandma's.
But no comparison in the courses, right?
Yeah, no comparison. Grandma's, I had a pretty good thing going, and at 19, I had a calf, sort of a catastrophic calf pull, and I had to stop. And then I really had to limp in the last 7 miles. In Boston, I ran pretty well into the teens, in the upper teens, and then I just struggled to maintain pace and was kind of in and out of 8s and low 9s, but didn't have anything catastrophic happen. So it's just sort of a general slowdown through the Newton Hills and Heartbreak Hill. But yeah, completely different races and weather, and also, like, I would say, stress and anxiety. The pressure of Boston just seemed monumental. Grandma's was a really calm and friendly race. We ran it as a family, not together, but we all went to the start line together, and very relaxed. And the crowd is smaller, and on the shore of Lake Superior, it's bucolic. Boston, there was just enormous pressure I think I put on myself. I'd maybe try to run with Sadie and run a good time, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, there's no doubt 3:38 though is an amazing achievement for that. No, it really is. Actually, at our advanced years, it's an amazing achievement.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes and no. Yeah, I'm proud of it. You always think you can do better, but I'm pretty pleased with it. It was in the top third of the age group, so I felt good about that stat. I kind of believe I could do a 3:15 or a 3:20, but you just have to get planets to align.
So on that, right, you believe you could do a 3:15 or a 3:20. Is running more marathons in your future or not?
Big question mark. After I've done 5 marathons sort of spread across my life, and after every one I swear off I'll never do another one, never again, because they're hard, and I've never made it through one feeling good at the end. And I really do miss leisure running. Like,
I get that.
During the Boston training period, you had to stick to your program, and you tell yourself constantly, do the training and you'll get the result. So I'm looking forward to getting back to leisure running. Teresa and I signed up for a 55K trail run along the New River Gorge in West Virginia. That's just going to be a run walk kind of trail run. We'll run together, just enjoy it, running along the New River Gorge and getting back to leisure running and not putting all that pressure on to form and get a time. Having said that, it's been fun. I feel like maybe I should focus on the half marathon. I think I've got 13 good miles in me. Brent, my son, always, after running Grandma's, he had a tough ending, and he said the marathon is just 6 miles too long. I kind of tend to agree with him. Half is a nice distance, and I can punch through 20. But boy, when you add those last 6, that's when the trouble begins.
Here's the other thing about running half marathons as well for me, is that my family doesn't run the same way that your family does. And so when I'm both training for and competing in a marathon, that is all consuming. And when you go to even the marathon weekend itself, Brian will say it's not a holiday or a long weekend together.
No.
It's all about the race, and you're shot after the race. Whereas a half marathon's just like a bit of time out your day, and you're sore after it, but you can go a long weekend to a nice city and run a cool half marathon there and still turn it into a family event And the training as well doesn't need to be all consuming. So I love the half marathon distance. I'm coming to that conclusion that that's my favorite.
Yeah, well said. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that it's an achievable distance. You can show progress, and you're right. It's not so all consuming that you have to change your lifestyle and everybody else is around you dramatically.
Yeah. Now, you ran some competitive half marathons prior to the marathon. Were those, like, I know you said you'd wish you'd run at marathon pace over the longer distances, but were those a nice alternative or even a better alternative to just putting in regular long runs, doing those speedy half races?
Yeah, I think so. I think they were beneficial. I was trying to work on the Sadie strategy of negative splits. On the first half relaxed and then pick it up. Because I've never run that way. I always, maybe this is old school male ego or something, but I always bomb out, go out hard and run till there's nothing left. And she's schooling me a little bit on, all right, that's probably not the best strategy. So I worked on that in the half marathons and was pretty successful. I ran them all like 137 to 138 range, which I felt good about. And negative split on all of them. And I kind of spaced them out through the 6-month training period, running them in the super shoe and just getting that feeling of running hard and running fast was good. So yeah, I would say yes, those were beneficial just to drop into your long runs, drop one of those in instead of a long run was good. And to work on negative splitting I wasn't successful at Boston at doing it, but I have aspirations.
Are you winning your age group or podiuming at 137, 138?
Yes, I mean, that's another thing that makes it more fun. If you choose your races wisely, you can often win your age group. And both Teresa and I almost always win our age group in some of these local races because we're talking about races with 200 or 300 people in them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of nice.
Yeah,
and,
it is. I like it.
At 137, I've been winning it pretty big. I had a guy who said, you're the guy who beat me by 9 minutes. That makes it fun. I don't know.
I don't want to let something drop that you said earlier. I want to go back to it because you talked about wanting to go to leisure running, right? And then you just casually threw it. No, I'm running a 55-kilometer ultra with my wife.
Yeah, good point.
Is that your first ultra, or have you done more than marathon distance before?
Yeah, we've done 2 or 3. I'd call them baby ultras. The ultra community views a 50K as like entry level kindergarten. You got to do a 50 miler or better to be to be really to get that cred. But yeah, we've done a couple. We did a 6-hour run one day several years back, and it was just around 1.25 mile loop. It was pretty hilly. We agreed to just run together and walk all the hills. And then we did a 50K trail run. That was pretty good too. I think we did 7 hours or something, and good mojo when we're running together. It just is a different ball game. You're not racing the clock anymore. Time is meaningless. You really are working to finish. You don't want to run those hills hard. You got to put something in the bank for later. It's just, it's a more pleasant kind of thing to do. And on trails, even more so. You're in the woods, you're breathing nice air, it's scenic, it's usually shady. Conditions are usually pretty good unless it's wet and muddy, but we try to avoid those.
Your contention then is that baby ultras, as you've called them, and I like that phrase, can be relaxing and a nice thing to do if you're fit. But at some point, you hit a threshold in ultras where it turns into this like battle for survival type experience. You think you can demark ultras like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes, because I think I'm a prime example. I'm much more inclined to hit the wall and fall apart in a marathon. But what's going on? You're running a harder pace. You're on roads, and you're not walking the hills. You're competing. You're competing. And so that's just not an option. Whereas you go do a baby ultra on trails, especially, you agree that you're gonna walk the hills and run otherwise. It's just a totally different mindset, and it's much more achievable without breaking down. I think, and
that's interesting.
You can take a more relaxed approach to nutrition. You take food with you. They have food stations. You stop and eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You're not worried about digestion like in a marathon. You worry about a gel. Is this gel with caffeine going to make me nauseous? In the ultras, you're just thinking, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich would be great right now. And it's just a more casual mindset, I think, and kind of allows you to be more relaxed about it, enjoy it some more. So I think you're less likely to get in that trouble, your muscles and things falling apart, than you are in a competitive road race.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I'd never really thought about baby ultras versus regular ultras, and that they can be dramatically different. But
one thing you should count on is in trail running, especially, they pride themselves on the distance never being accurate. So if it says 50K, which I think translates to 32 miles or something, be ready to run 30 to see 34 on your Garmin.
Funny you say that, because I ran 2 trail races earlier in the year, and one of them was an 8-miler that was 9.5, and one of them was a half marathon that was like 14.25.
What is that? Is that just a thing?
But I do like the vibe of the people that run these races. They're just kind of out there, and it's just a fun, hippie camping vibe when you're there around the finish line and the start line.
Yeah, I think that's true. Teresa runs with a trail running group in a big wooded park outside of Pittsburgh called North Park, and yeah, the camaraderie is good. They all have the same sort of mindset. It is definitely a subset of the running community. I think it's more accepting and accommodating of older runners. It's just a lot more middle-aged runners are doing it because you're not racing the clock. You're there trying to finish and enjoy, which is a different mindset.
Herein lies like one of the core of my problems. We've talked about trail running, we've talked about baby ultras, we've talked about marathon races, we've talked about how we think half marathons are a great distance. And I've been jumping around like aimlessly between all of these kind of things. And I feel like in terms of achieving potential, I'm doing myself short in all of them because I'm not focusing on one of them. And it bothers me a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great point. Should you pick one and stick with it? Should it be a half marathoner and win in your age group, or be on the podium in your age group and do that? Or that's a good question. If Teresa was here, she'd have a good answer to that, because she manages to find a great balance between road racing and trail running and everything else. I think you can balance it off, frankly. Trail running is just a nice, relaxed way, but it can be training for half marathons. You can pick one day a week where you do a tempo run on the roads, and that could be your half marathon sort of training run. But the rest of the time, get out on trail. So I don't know. I guess we found a happy medium. You can do both, but I agree. You won't be a champion 60 plus road runner unless you really focus on that.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to a very core point. I'll illustrate it by a conversation I actually had during a race with a friend of mine who I admire immensely. So his name's Jim, and he's super fit, not super fast, but super fit. And he does like 50-mile bike rides 3-4 times a week and intersperses it with runs and so on. And we were running a trail half marathon. There was a group of 4 of us. And we came out of a kind of wooded area into like an area that was pretty clear, and it was like an uphill grassy section. And you could finally see the people who were in front of you. And I counted them off in the distance. There were 8 of them. And I said to Jim, there's the 8 people we're going to catch over the next 25 minutes. And he turned to me and he said, why?
Yeah.
He said, it's a beautiful day. We're all enjoying running with each other. We're running pretty fast. Why are we going to catch them? I think that's the core of the question about running aims anyway, is if you can ask that why, then you're running for an enjoyment, and you can run all the different types of races and things that you want. If you're looking at the 8 people ahead and you're like, these are the folk that we're going to catch, then I think you need to think about, okay, what's my race? If I'm really that competitive, what's my race? I'm going to try and be the guy that always catches those 8.
I know a guy named Jerry Levasseur. I think I've introduced him to you, at least on paper. An older runner. He was Sadie's sort of assistant coach in college, but ran with my stepfather all around New England, sort of 40s, 50s, and 60s in competitive races. And just an amazing personal story for another time about Jerry. But his credo was you should run for fun, friendship, and fitness in that order. And there's something to that. And that's a guy who's a very competitive runner and overcame some major obstacles in his life. But I don't know. That's something. Those are words to live by, I think.
I've been doing a lot of thinking and actually a lot of writing on exactly that topic recently, and so I want to return to it at a different point. But let's assume we've resolved that discussion and just go on to, with the time that we have left, talk a bit about goals going forward and the barriers to kind of achieving those. I'm thinking about the physical barriers that we face as older runners and so on. So it sounds like you're goal-wise for the rest of this year, you're going to do the baby ultra and you're going to do some more half marathons. Is that where your head's at?
Yes, I think run for fun is going to be the theme for the rest of the year. The baby ultra is in the third week of May. And then we go up to Minnesota in the summers. We've got some property up there, and they have a little 4-mile 4th of July race in town around a lake, and so that's on the radar. And again, we love these little local races where you can win your age group, have a decent finish, and enjoy it without killing yourself. When we get back to Pittsburgh in the fall, there's some good races. There's a 10-miler that both Teresa and I really enjoy. Definitely try to do some more trail running. I'm going to try to get through. For marathon training, I really did focus more on running on the roads, just to be accustomed to that. So I'm kind of looking forward to getting back in the woods. It's easier on the body. It's a better all-around kind of workout, usually cooler and softer and no car exhaust, and just generally more pleasant. Boston is really, it really was all consuming, and it really took a lot. I had a couple of super emotional moments kind of leading into it, and a few sort of speed bumps and little injuries and things leading up to it. And that just makes you panic, think, oh my gosh, I'm out. Sadie had that too. I think every runner, nobody's training goes perfectly. Yeah. And when you have that much pressure, you get a little injury of some kind, and you think it's catastrophic. It starts to play on your head. So anyway, I'm gonna take it easy and relax and not try to put so much pressure on for the rest of the year.
Just in concluding the marathon discussion, tell me about your is it fascia or fascia? How do you pronounce it?
Fascia.
Fascia, right? Tell me about that, and because that was your main physical thing you had to overcome in the training, right?
Yeah. Yep. I had kind of two things going on. I had really just some general soreness in my kind of like right glute and hip flexors, tightness and soreness after every tempo run or intervals after every run, really. For grandmas, I'd kind of gone down a chiropractic path for therapy. And while it got me through, it's pretty limited. They can crack your back every time and do a procedure, but it really didn't solve the problem, and the problem reoccurred. And as you know, during grandma's, I did have a catastrophic calf strain. It took a long time to recover. I tried to run on it too soon after the marathon and kind of aggravated it again. And I would say it was probably a 2-month recovery on that. So I went to this myofascial therapist, and you may be familiar with sort of myofascial trigger points. And that's where you can put distinct sort of hard pressure on these trigger points throughout your body and cause them to sort of relax. This guy didn't focus on trigger points. He just focused on the fascia throughout the whole body. And the fascia is like that sort of silver skin that encases the muscles. So if you get a muscle strain, it swells up. It sometimes pushes out of the fascia. And if you have kind of fascial overlap and kind of congestion, then that can impede your functionality of your muscles. I went to this guy with the hip issue, and he just had me stand in front of him, and they just rattled off 6 or 7 things that were wrong. They're like, why are your knees hyperextended? And why are your feet splayed out like duck feet? And I can clearly see like the right hip bone is like 1.5 inches higher than the left one. Same with your shoulders. And he said, I have a feeling that as that calf injury healed, it just tightened everything up on your right side, and you've been overcompensating for it. And so what he proceeded to do, I saw him weekly, basically from then until Boston, was just kind of, I would like unlock my fascia and really release a lot of that sort of shrinkage and tightening that was going on. And it was super, super effective. And then about 3 weeks before Boston, on one of my long runs, I had kind of a it's called the lower quadricep, vastus medialis on the left side, but on the inside of the leg, right above the knee. I got like a sort of a blow up there at about mile 16 on a 20-mile run. And by mile 18, I had to walk. It was so painful. I was still seeing him, and we just put an emergency process and focus on that as well. And it was super helpful. And just, I was very careful those last 3 weeks. I kind of had to start my taper a little early and stopped running for 5 days to let it heal. And then I slowly started getting loose and running a little bit. And so it was very helpful. And on my last session with him, which was Thursday before Boston, he said, "You're not going to have any blowouts." I took that to heart. I thought about that during the race.
Great.
Yeah. If I felt something kind of funny down there during the race, I just said, no. The therapist said, "You're not going to have any blowouts." You know. So I thought it was good. I mean, he said he's helped a lot of runners. He doesn't do dry needling or anything else. He really just focuses on the fascia.
Is it expensive?
It is actually, because it wasn't.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Strangely, it's not covered by insurance. If I went to my chiropractor with the same complaint, they can get some kind of insurance cover, some level. But this myofascial, I think they sort of lump it in with massage.
You know something? Ron James and Russell Wilson spend millions on their body every year, and this is generally an inexpensive hobby that we have. And so spending a bit of money on maintaining our capability on it, I think, is really wise thing to do, isn't it? Yeah.
I agree. You know, there's a lot that starts to happen at our age. And basically he said, maybe afterwards we see each other every, 2 months or something. Then it's not so expensive. Yeah, go in for a tune-up.
I'm getting some physical therapy right now. Actually, I went through my doctor because it's something that had persisted even after rest. And so we got an x-ray done first just to make sure I hadn't broken anything, but it was definitely soft tissue. So I've been going through some just physical therapy at the local hospital under my insurance recently, and it's been really beneficial.
And where's the pain?
It's tendonitis. It's Achilles tendonitis in my right foot and or right ankle. And the reason I was so careful about it is it's where I ruptured my Achilles before when I played soccer back in 2007. So I was scared to death, like I was going to do that again. I'm slowly getting over it. One of the good things that happened to me is I got my second respiratory infection of this year a few weeks ago, and that just stopped me cold from doing anything on it. And I think that was just the break it needed, calm down, and now I'm slowly building back. But I'm only at... this week, I will maybe get to 18, 19 miles total.
Achilles is a real tricky one that does take some time to heal, and you can't really rush it, right?
But it's also made me fundamentally rethink the way that I train. No matter what I end up doing in terms of races and so on, I've completely changed the way that I train. I'm cutting running down to 4 days a week. So that gives me a lot of gaps between it. Only 2 days in a row, Saturday, Sunday. I'm building up to, I'm about 2.5 days, but I'll get to 3 days of strength training a week. Not like lifting heavy weights, a lot of body weight training, core stuff. That's making a huge difference to my capabilities. And then I've added in some cross training. I've got a rower here in the garage. I dusted off my bike. I watched a podcast, not a podcast, it was like a webinar on this subject about older runners. And it was a guy who was a coach in South Africa, and his dad was a really top-notch marathon and ultra-marathon runner whose times had started to decline as he got into his 50s. And he finally talked his dad into listening to him and took over his dad's training regime and actually backed off the number of miles he was running, but built up the strength and the cross-training. And I think for me, I've proven to myself now on 3 separate occasions that when I average more than 40 miles a week, I injure myself. And so I recognize I need to step up the intensity. If I'm going to get faster and tougher, I need to continue to train at a high level, but it doesn't need to be running. I need to substitute in strength, and I need to substitute in cross training. So that's the path I'm going down to see how that works.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, I usually run 3 or 4 days a week, and that's it. My body just tells me I need to recover. One thing you mentioned that's worth talking about a little bit is the coaching market. I think that's really heating up with the pandemic and the acceptance of Zoom and remote training of all kinds. I think suddenly there's this emerging market for coaching. And prior to the marathon, I joined the Boston Marathon Facebook page, and a lot of people have weighed in on, how did their coaching, how did it do? Have they seen results? And I've seen some pretty good success stories. And even for runners our age, work with a coach who gives you workouts and understands the aging runner and keeps you from doing too much, tells you when to back off and that kind of thing. People have really had some good progression to the coach. I know you did, I think. Are you still working with one?
It's interesting. I worked with one for grandmas. It was like through Macmillan Running, and I was very disappointed in it because I felt they were drip feeding me. Like, I had no visibility of how I was building up to running. What was my first marathon? So I had no idea what marathon training was about. And they were drip feeding me every 2 or 3 weeks, another 2 or 3 weeks worth of training, and the communication wasn't great. But I think it was just a bad coaching experience rather than coaching is bad. It's my intention to try it again once I know what the hell I'm going to train for. I don't really have that clear in my mind yet.
Definitely look at the the Boston Marathon Facebook page, because there was some named referrals there. And they really talked about, hey, this guy makes me feel like I'm just one of a few athletes that he's coaching, and gives me the time I expected, and I don't feel like a number and I'm getting a group workout. I feel like it's really tailored to me.
I think I'll definitely look into that again and go down that path again. A couple of other things I'm doing just now, though, before I do any of that, I'm getting my weight right again. I dropped a lot of weight for my daughter's wedding, but I was like a wrinkly old prune. You just like dropping weight and everything was like hanging off me. As I built up thereafter over the next 6 months for Grandma's Marathon, I started putting weight on, and as you do, I think, training for a marathon, and I got in good shape for Grandma's. And then I started putting a little bit more weight on as I was training for the Valencia Marathon, and I was able to carry that okay. I did well in that. And then after that, I just kept eating the way I was eating, but not training at the same level. So my weight, as it does, just crept up. And I was 20 pounds off the weight I should be running at. So I'm working on that a little bit just now. And that fits in well with cross training and not training for races. Don't take on too much at once would be the, advice I would give others on that. So I'm getting there on that.
It's interesting, that you came into nutrition in general in the conversation, because I feel like that's kind of the last lever. There's training, there's flexibility, strength are some of the levers that we have to try to improve our performance. And nutrition's kind of the last one. And starting to really think about that. Like, I never really even believed, frankly, that the reason my muscles were all tightening up at mile 17 was because I didn't have enough carbs. And I carbo loaded for Boston. And then I did some, I was using honey stingers. I took one before the race, and then every sort of 6 miles or every hour, really. And most people that are running marathons are doing more than that, more frequently. I kind of feel like my body almost shuts down during the run. And no matter what I do, it's not really getting through. But I don't think that's true. I do think pre-race and race day nutrition is super important. For Boston, I stopped kind of all diuretics 2 weeks before, no alcohol and just 1 cup of coffee. I would have maximum hydration, just flooding my body with water so that everything would be wet, the cells, the muscles, the fascia. And then during the race, I think I could do even more. That's something I'd be interested in your thoughts. It's kind of the last lever. Race day nutrition. Is it real? Is that really what's causing your legs to tighten up and stop responding to your commands?
I can only speak from the experience of 2 marathons. I had a fundamentally different approach to Valencia than I did in Grandma's. Like, in Valencia, I was taking supplements roughly every 30 minutes. And I took a variety of different ones, quite like the goos, but once I get beyond 2 of them, I can't really deal with them. It's too cloying. So I'd been using more starch-based ones. UCAN's an obvious one, and then there's another one I was using. I actually mapped out in advance of the race where all the water stops were, and I had a white card in my pocket that had that about 200 meters before each of them, the point, what gel I was going to take at each point before each of those stops. And I ended up taking 8 different ones during the whole race. Now, one of the great things about Valencia was that rather than the little cups, they actually gave out little bottles with lids on them of both water and Gatorade. So it was great.
Oh,
You know,
nice.
you could pick those up and run with them with 100 yards or so, and then just kind of mix your gel with your drink. And that was fantastic. That really helped. I was so much fresher the last 6 miles of that marathon than I was at Grandma's. And I feel it was all down to, or not all, but fundamentally down to nutrition. And one very interesting thing I think was I turned down my last one that was at kilometer 40. Like I just felt I couldn't stomach it. I thought I was going to throw up if I took it. So I didn't take it. And those were slow, 40 and 41 up to like till I saw the finish line were slow for me. And I noticed that that young guy who won it, who also won London last week, I was watching him in the race feed, and he took one with like a kilometre and a half to go. He was still taking his stuff. And I do think taking a consistent input, if your stomach can handle it, and I think that's part of the training, is training your stomach to handle at pace. And I think, you know, you were talking about how you would like to run longer runs close to marathon pace. Another benefit of that, of running a 20-miler close to marathon pace, is you're getting your stomach and your breathing used to taking gels in at that speed. It's a totally different experience taking a gel in at 138 beats per minute than it is at 128 beats per minute. It's so much harder.
Well, great to hear that. Yeah, I'm gonna experiment with that. It's much more of a constant consumption idea than you're taking this one gel just a final boost or something. And I never really was a huge believer in it, but I'm definitely gonna be trying more of that. Like every half hour is a good pacing. And you do see the elite runners doing it. Kipchoge missed that bottle at 21, and he claimed that had some impact.
I've got 2 mementos from the Valencia Marathon. One is my medal, which I really like, and the other is my white card with where I'd marked off all the gels that I would take there. That's the 2 things I kept from that race. And talking about keeping things from that race, let's finish the call with seeing your medal from Boston, because you earned it, and I'm sure you've got it nearby. So let's see it.
Yeah. I just happen to have it here. You know, I'm sitting on the table. Yeah, it's interesting. The finisher medal, I put it on. You know,
yeah,
it's a big deal. I'll try to get it up to the camera here. In Boston, they ran out of medals for the cutoff for the people at 6 hours who were coming in at the cutoff is 6 hours for Boston, and they ran out, which was a huge mistake. You know, they clearly ordered enough, they just didn't bring enough to the finish line, and people were just so hugely upset by that. I don't collect medals. I usually don't even take them after the little races and stuff, just because they end up cluttering the closet. But the Boston, I had to take it.
Yeah. If people actually end up watching this or listening to this and have aspirations to run either marathons or Boston, I think they've got a ton of great advice from your experience today.
Well, thanks, David. I appreciate the opportunity, and for you, I definitely recommend, if you can get Boston into your schedule the next a few years. Yeah. It's an experience you'll never forget.
I think I will. Like, I've got a qualifying time right now. If it holds up, I will race it next year, and if it doesn't, it doesn't.
I don't think they'll change. Hopefully, the BQ for us. I think it's pretty solid where it is. So hopefully it'll hold up.
All right. Well, great to speak to you.
Great. Until next time.
All right.
Thanks, David. See you.